You've been told Canvas apps are back. Cute story. The truth? Microsoft didn't revive anything. They forked the experience. App builder, workflows, and agents look like Power Platform, but they live in a different lane. Your personal automation layer. In the next few minutes, I'll show you the architectural split, the data layer trade-offs, and the governance switches that keep Copilot from leaking secrets. You'll learn exactly where App Builder fits, why SharePoint lists are a trap, and the one policy that saves your tenant. Now let's peel back the facade, starting with what Microsoft quietly changed. The facade. Why App Builder feels like Power Apps, and why that's misleading. App Builder feels familiar on purpose. Microsoft borrowed Pro patterns, define the schema, then paint the UI, bind controls, wire actions. It's the same muscle memory you've built in Power Apps. That's not an accident, it's a lure. The interface signals, this is safe, you know this. The truth? Familiarity is not capability. Enter the default backend, SharePoint Lists. Fast to spin up, already licensed, already in your tenant. It's the office junk drawer. Handy, reachable, and terrifying when you rely on it to hold anything heavy. Lists are flat, lookups are limited, delegation rules silently cap your queries, and you discover them the hard way, when someone adds data and your app stops returning complete results. The average user shrugs. You, however, inherit the outage. Now compare that to the Power Platform's grown-up posture. Dataverse first, proper relational modeling, field and row-level security. Auditing that doesn't feel like a diary written in crayon. Application lifecycle management with solutions, environments, and pipelines. App Builder waves at that world from across the parking lot and then sprints back to SharePoint for snacks. Workflows deepen the illusion. The mental model mirrors Power. Automate, triggers, actions, connectors, branching. You see familiar shapes and think governance applies the same way. And yes, many of the same connectors appear, but the scope is personal. Guardrails are thinner. Early iterations even simulate send operations so users can test flows without actually shipping email into the wild. Safety by training wheels. Good for experiments, deceptive for architects who think they're buying enterprise-grade behavior. Scripting. Constrained. Asset handling. Often via URLs, not managed binaries. Why? These defaults are governance-friendly in the sense that they reduce blast radius. They're also capability light. You can prototype quickly without detonating your compliance program. You can also build something deceptively useful that rots the minute it meets real requirements. Reporting across lists, approvals with audit trails, or role-based access that isn't whoever has the link. Here's the thing most people miss. Looking like Power Platform doesn't make it Power Platform. Enterprise readiness requires Dataverse, Entra-backed, RBAC, and ALM. Period. Without those, you have a personal sandbox wrapped in a professional costume. It's cosplay, not capability. Why this matters? Users will build real apps in the wrong substrate. They'll stack requirements, relationships, aggregations, external calls on top of a flat list and wonder why performance collapses or data leaks start to look inevitable. Then your team gets the inevitable. Can you make this scale? Email translation. Please migrate our toy into a plane while we're flying it. Let me spell out the traps so you can spot them early. Delegation limits mean your filters stop working at scale and the app shows partial data with alarming confidence. API limits on list operations throttle what feels like just a small automation. Lookup ceilings turn your quick join into a dead end. Performance degradation arrives gradually, then suddenly, like a misconfigured index revenge. And security? Personal context inheritance means access looks fine until the creator leaves or moves roles. Then permissions evaporate, ownership gets muddled, and you're running recovery operations on a tool nobody documented because, of course, it was just a little app. This is how Shadow IT graduates from nuisance to incident. So yes, App Builder feels like Power Apps. That's the misdirection. It's optimized for speed, not structure, for personal value, not shared accountability. It lowers friction so people can think with their hands. That's good. It also accumulates debt faster than your finance team can say re-platform with you. If you remember nothing else from this section, familiarity is not a feature, it's a sales tactic. Treat App Builder like a personal automation tool with training wheels, not a gateway to your enterprise backbone. Use it to learn, to test, to draft. The minute your requirements whisper relationships, audit, or growth, you're out of the junk drawer and into Dataverse. We'll unpack that split next. The split, personal Copilot layer versus enterprise Power Platform. Here's the architectural reality. There are two lanes now. The personal Copilot layer, App Builder, workflows, lightweight automations exists for one person or a small team to move fast. The enterprise Power Platform, Dataverse, solutions, ALM, COE, RBAC, exists to run durable, shared systems with accountability. If you confuse the lanes, you pay for it later. Start with data. The personal lane is SharePoint, OneDrive first. It's quick, permissive, and, let's be honest, structured like a spreadsheet with delusions of grandeur. The enterprise lane is Dataverse first. It's a real data platform, relational modeling, proper data types, row and field level security, auditing, and API governance. One is a junk drawer, the other is a filing system with logs, and a librarian who remembers everything. Security posture follows the substrate. Personal automations inherit the user's context. If you can see it, your Copilot built thing can see it. Until you can't, because roles change, people leave, or someone cleans up a group and removes access. Dataverse ties access to enter identities and roles, enforces row level and column level security, and produces audit trails that stand up to scrutiny. The truth? In the personal lane, trust is implied. In the enterprise lane, trust is modeled, enforced, and verified. Scale is where the split becomes painful. SharePoint can handle simple lists and straightforward filters. But once you need relationships, cascading lookups, rollups, or transactional integrity, you hit the ceiling. Dataverse is built for growth. Normalized schemas, relationships, calculated and roll-up columns, concurrency controls, and yes, service protection limits that keep everyone honest. You design for scale there, you hope for it in SharePoint. Governance surfaces are different by design. Personal Copilot apps largely bypass your COE and ALM pipelines. That's the point. Reduce IT backlog, let users self-serve, and keep the blast radius small. Enterprise Power Platform rides inside your governance, environments, solutions, managed versus unmanaged, pipelines, approvals, and separation of duties. One feels frictionless, the other feels like process. That friction is what makes it auditable and supportable. Why does this split exist? Because Microsoft is optimizing for two contradictory truths. Users need to automate without waiting 6 weeks for a backlog ticket. IT needs durability, compliance, and observability. Copilot's personal layer gives speed, Power Platform gives structure. And agents, yes, the orchestration brain, need fast substrates to experiment, iterate, and compose workflows on the fly. The compromise is deliberate, lower friction for creation, higher standards for promotion. Inventory and lifecycle tell the same story. In the personal lane, ownership is whoever clicked first. Documentation is optional. Lifecycle is keep it until it breaks. In the enterprise lane, ownership is explicit, metadata is enforced, change is packaged, and retirement is a controlled event. You don't send a memo to decommission a personal script. You absolutely do for a shared app that runs quarter end. The thing most people miss, Copilot isn't trying to replace Power Platform. It's trying to route personal intent through a fast lane while delegating durable execution to governed services. Think of Copilot as the conductor. It takes your prompt, plans a sequence, calls tools, and returns results. Power Platform is the orchestra, APIs, data, connectors, that actually plays in time and keeps records of the performance. When the piece becomes a staple, you write it into the score, Dataverse, solutions, pipelines, so others can play it the same way tomorrow. Of course, there are trade-offs. Personal lane speed means fewer guardrails. Expect simulated sends, connector approvals, and conservative defaults that avoid blasting your tenant. Enterprise lane rigor means cost, planning, and the occasional no that saves you from public embarrassment. You need both. Use the personal lane to ideate and validate. Use the enterprise lane to operationalize. Before we move on, put this in policy language your organization can live with. If the thing only serves its creator and a small cohort, has no regulatory data, and won't live past a quarter, it's personal Copilot territory. If it shares data across teams, touches customer records, requires audit, or has SLAs, it starts or quickly moves in Dataverse with ALM. Draw the line. Publish examples. Enforce the handoff. Once you nail that, everything else clicks. Copilot becomes the front door for ideas. Power Platform becomes the factory that builds the production version. Governance stops being a roadblock and becomes a runway. And yes, the minute a quick app smells like real business, you promote it on purpose before it collapses under its own cleverness. The migration cliff, from toy app to critical system and the cost. Great, until the personal app becomes the thing sales depends on every Monday. This is where the toy hits the wall. A flat list works when you're logging your own tasks. The moment you need relationships, projects to tasks, tasks to people, people to departments, you're forcing a spreadsheet to cosplay as a database. Spoiler, it can't. Growth exposes the seams in 4 ways. First, delegation. Filters that worked at 500 rows start silently lying at 5,000. Users think data is missing. It is. The app returns partial sets because the query exceeded delegation rules. Second, API limits. That cute automation that posts updates every time a record changes. It now hammers service limits during payroll week and randomly fails. Third, lookups. The ceiling on nested lookups turns your model into spaghetti you can't untangle. Fourth, performance. More joins, more attachments, more users. Then the UI crawls and everyone blames Copilot because of course they do. Audit and reporting make it worse. Leadership wants historical changes, approvals, and who touched what. SharePoint has version history, yes, but try producing a clean audit trail with row field lineage and you'll wish you hadn't volunteered. Dataverse does this natively. In the personal lane, you duct tape exports, pray the timestamps align, and call it good enough until a regulator asks follow-up questions. Ownership is the sneaky failure mode. Personal context inheritance means the creator's permissions are the app's skeleton key. When they change roles or leave, your app's access chain collapses. Files break, flows stop, connectors lose secrets, and you discover the buzz factor was 1. Congratulations, you've built a critical system that's literally owned by a person. Now the migration tax comes due. Step 1. Reverse engineer logic nobody documented. You diff flows, decipher prompt-crafted expressions, and guess at intended behavior. Step 2. Design a proper Dataverse model. Tables, relationships, calculated and roll-up columns, security roles. Step 3. Rebuild UI and automations in solutions, not loose objects. Step 4. Establish ALM, environments, pipelines, approvals, change control. Step 5. Move data, fix referential integrity, and validate reporting. This is not a lift and shift. It's a replatform plus archaeology. And yes, service protection limits in Dataverse exist too, by design. They're guardrails, not bugs. You'll refactor to batch operations, respect retry after headers, and stop pretending bursty, unbounded calls are fine. This is the price of real scale. If that sentence hurt, good. It means you're finally doing engineering. Connector fantasies die here. We'll just email the PDF. No, you won't, not without approvals, DLP checks, and sometimes simulated sends in the personal lane. Admins rightfully gate external systems. Personal workflows let people experiment. Enterprise workflows require governance. If emailing customers is a business process, it belongs in governed connectors with audit, not in someone's side project. So how do you spot the cliff before you drive off it? Look for these signals. More than one list and cross-list joins. Approvals that need audit trails. External APIs, customer data, or finance data. Reporting that requires consistent historical truth. A second team asking to use it. Any two of those, you're already late. Graduate to Dataverse. Here's the shortcut nobody teaches. Define exit criteria on day 1. Write a Dataverse threshold and publish it. Example, if we need more than one relationship per record, role-based access beyond site permissions, or more than a few thousand rows with reliable filters, we move. If it touches regulated data, we start in Dataverse. If it becomes shared beyond a pilot team for more than 1 quarter, we move. Simple. Enforce it. A micro story to make this concrete. A team built a time tracker with App Builder. It worked until month 3. They needed department-level roll-ups, manager approvals, and weekly reporting. Delegation bit them, lookups maxed out, and the flow started hitting limits on Fridays. They rebuilt in Dataverse across 2 sprints and never looked back. The difference wasn't AI got smarter. The difference was the right substrate. The truth? Speed is the appetizer. Governance is the meal. Design for the exit, or you'll pay for the rescue. Now, let's put guardrails where they actually work. Governance that actually works. DLP, permissions, and restricted surfaces. You keep speed without detonating compliance by governing the edges, not micromanaging the middle. Start with the policy that actually stops leaks. Label first DLP. Sensitivity labels in Microsoft Purview are the bouncer at the door. If content is labeled confidential or highly confidential, Copilot respects that label and either refuses to process, redacts payloads, or routes the request through allowed paths only. This is how you prevent summarize the merger deck from becoming oops. And yes, the Copilot policy location matters. Put your allow deny for processing under the Copilot-specific DLP controls, not just generic Exchange or SharePoint DLP, or you'll miss the runtime that matters. Permission hygiene is next. Least privilege isn't a slogan, it's the brake pedal. Run access reviews on key sites. Use tools like site access management and data access governance to surface oversharing you already forgot about. Fix broken inheritance, kill everyone except external users where it never belonged, and tag your crown jewels with sensitivity labels so DLP has teeth. Copilot aggregates what permissions allow. If your baseline is sloppy, Copilot will be a megaphone for your mistakes. Restricted SharePoint search is your containment switch during rollout waves. You temporarily limit Copilot's indexable scope to approved sites while you remediate the mess. That buys you time to relabel content, correct permissions, and standardize ownership without turning Copilot into a tenant-wide spelunker. No, it's not a forever state. It's triage. Close the doors, clean the room, then reopen what's ready. Now the playbook, use this verbatim if you like brevity. 1. Enable Copilot DLP and explicitly block processing of confidential and highly confidential content unless the destination and agent are in your allow list. 2. Require labels on document libraries that feed Copilot or App Builder assets. Auto-label where feasible, manual for the weird edge cases. 3. Permission hygiene, quarterly access reviews on high-value sites, immediate cleanup of open links, and a ban on orphaned owners. 4. Scope control, turn on restricted SharePoint search for pilot groups, widen as remediation completes. 5. Connectors. Require admin approvals for email and external systems. Log new connector use. Review weekly. 6. Monitoring. Watch the Purview audit stream for Copilot activity. And tune policies based on reality, not vibes. Licensing matters because features aren't imaginary. Advanced DLP and richer analytics live in E5 or E5 compliance. E3 gives you core DLP, which is enough to enforce labels and block obvious exfiltration, but lighter on granularity. Translate budget into reach. If you want fine-grained policies, broader coverage, and better reporting, fund it. Otherwise, constrain scope and be honest about what you can't see. Guardrails are not the enemy of velocity. They're how velocity becomes sustainable. Allow personal automations by default, inside the low-risk lane. Block sensitive processing by default until you explicitly allow it. Put approvals in front of risky connectors, email, external storage, custom APIs. But that slows people down. Correct, it slows down the parts that create incidents. Everything else stays fast. Migration governance needs a line in the sand. Declare what's personal versus enterprise. Document the handoff to Dataverse, criteria, templates, and the process to promote. Ownership gets reassigned from a person to a team, Entra roles replace ad hoc permissions, and agents or flows move into environments with solutions and pipelines. You're not punishing experimentation, you're upgrading it to a supported service. Agent governance deserves its own checklist. Inventory agents centrally. Export metadata, owner, capabilities, connected data, sensitivity, exposure. Assign Entra agent IDs, so access is auditable and revocable. Tag capabilities, who can email, who can post externally, who can touch finance. Enforce least privilege permissions for agents just like users. And when someone leaves, reassign agent ownership and secrets immediately. Deprovision on a schedule, not after the outage. 2 micro warnings most people ignore. First, simulated send is a training wheel, not a hall pass. Don't treat it like a sandbox to bypass approvals. Second, URL-based asset handling is not content management. If it matters, bring it into governed repositories with labels. Don't duct tape links into prompts and call it hardened. The truth, you don't need perfect governance. You need consistent, enforced boundaries. Labels drive decisions. Permissions reflect reality. Search scope limits blast radius. Approvals gate risk, do that, and Copilot can accelerate the right work without turning your tenant into a very efficient leak. What Microsoft is really building, agents as the new runtime. Now the real agenda. Enter agents, the runtime that plans, calls tools, and checks its own work. Not a single chatbot with good manners. A multi-agent system with specialization, one agent that knows HR policy, another that understands finance workflows, another that can negotiate calendars without starting a small war. They coordinate, they hand off, they keep receipts. Copilot Studio is the cockpit. Low-code tuning lets you define capabilities with your data and workflows. Pro-code toolkits wire in APIs and custom skills when low-code taps out. The result isn't a bot. It's a governed operator that understands your processes and executes them repeatably. And yes, human in the loop is built in. Agents show steps, you approve, they continue. Control isn't optional, it's the default. Identity matters. Agents get Entra agent IDs, so access is role-based, auditable, and revocable. Compliance isn't bolted on later. Purview labels flow through, DLP policies apply. And when an agent touches Dataverse, information protection rides along. The data layer is deliberate. Durable records live in Dataverse. Transient scaffolding can live in SharePoint while you prototype. Compare that to random macros on someone's desktop. This is civilization. Operationally, Copilot plans, assembles, and orchestrates. Power Platform provides durable services, data, connectors, APIs that stand the test of Monday mornings. The reason SharePoint First keeps showing up in App Builder is speed. Agents need a low-friction substrate to sketch solutions, iterate, and discard. When a pattern proves valuable, you promote it. Dataverse tables, solutions, pipelines, so the agent's plan runs against governed backends. Your new job isn't to paint every screen, it's to govern connection points, classify data so agents know what they can touch, approve connectors with real oversight. Define agent permissions like you would a service account, least privilege, capability tags, separation of duties. Keep an inventory you can export, reassign ownership when people move, deprovision on purpose. Future-proofing is policy, not prophecy. Publish your Dataverse thresholds so promotion isn't an argument. Template common agent patterns, onboarding, QBR prep, incident triage, so teams don't reinvent brittle flows. Document ALM for escalation so personal becomes enterprise without a bonfire. The truth? Agents are the new runtime. Power Platform is the backbone. Your governance is the circulatory system that keeps the organism alive. Rapid implementation checklist. Define the lanes. Publish criteria and examples for personal Copilot apps versus enterprise Power Platform. If it's personal, short-lived, and low risk, it's fine to live in the personal lane. Everything else gets Dataverse and ALM. Set Dataverse thresholds. Relationship count, record volume, external APIs, audit needs, role-based access. Cross any two, you promote. Turn on Copilot DLP. Use the Copilot policy location. block processing for confidential and highly confidential by default, allow only approved agents and destinations. Expand label coverage, auto-label at scale, require manual labels for edge libraries, audit monthly for gaps, fix permissions, run access, reviews, remediate oversharing, and kill open links on sensitive sites. Make ownership explicit, control scope, enable restricted SharePoint search for rollout waves, widen only after remediation. Govern connectors, require approvals for email and external systems, log new connector usage and review weekly. Govern agents, inventory and export metadata. Assign intra-agent IDs, tag capabilities, define deprovision steps and ownership reassignment. Build a migration runway. Document replatform steps. Provide Dataverse starter templates. Estimate rebuild costs so teams understand the tags. Teach the exit. Train power users on thresholds. Hold office hours titled, "Should this move to Dataverse?" Micro stories and aha moments. A team built a time tracker in App Builder. 12 weeks later, delegation and lookup ceilings forced a Dataverse rebuild. 2 sprints, problem solved, speed returned because the substrate was right. DLP prevented a near miss. Copilot refused to summarize a highly confidential contract. Labels did the work while humans took the credit. An access review revealed an overshared site powering a Copilot workflow. Restricted SharePoint search contained the blast radius while permissions were fixed. An onboarding agent coordinated HR and IT using governed connectors and Dataverse. Outputs were auditable, handoffs clean. If you remember nothing else, define lanes, enforce labels, plan the exit. Here's the takeaway. Copilot didn't resurrect Canvas apps. It created a personal automation lane, while agents become the runtime and Dataverse remains the governed backbone. Do the smart thing this week, publish your lane policy, enable Copilot DLP with label-based blocking, and set Dataverse thresholds so promotions aren't debates. If this saved you cleanup hours, subscribe and catch the next deep dive on agent governance, identity, permissions, and lifecycle, so your tenant scales without drama.